So private equity is still in the spotlight in the presidential election campaign. We've got Mitt Romney now gearing up for South Carolina, where it looks like this film is going to be going around. What is it called? King of Bane.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's going to be the bane of his existence down there. I mean, they are really ripping private equity and his record as a job killer and destroyer and vulture to no end.
You know, and then it got exacerbated yesterday with with the additional news from Carlyle, which had nothing to do with politics, but just as this whole thing is blowing up on private equity, where the Republicans are ganging up on
the Republicans themselves,
right,
including people like Huntsman, whose family have certainly played well with private equity, or Newt Gingrich, who was paid fortune by Forceman Little to give them lots of advice. They're still ripping apart the private equity industry.
Right.
And then in the midst of this,
Carlyle comes out. It's part of its IPO process. It needs to disclose how much money all the partners made. Turns out that the three guys at the top of Carlyle made $400 million last year in carried interest, which is really not going to do a lot for private equity's image in the public domain.
Why? Because they make a lot of money?
Well, it's not just because they make a lot of money. It's because
they don't pay taxes.
It's because they don't pay taxes, and because private equity is playing on a national stage now. It's not. It's not on the business pages, it's on the front pages because of Romney. Romney, everybody's been waiting for this moment. Private equity guy running for president. We knew private equity would be part of the story. But now, in the middle of this, gets dropped this bomb that these guys are paying. They paid $400 million, and they only pay 15% tax on all of
I mean,
that.
they pay tax, but they pay 15% because they have
it's treated as
carried interest
as a capital gain instead of as income.
Right. So Uncle Sam was basically
screwed out of
$80 million. Just
from
1 year from three guys at Carlyle as we're going through this thing. But we've talked about this a lot, and I think we're going to be talking about it even more, but I mean, the rap on the industry is going to be quite negative. I mean, I would have thought that exemption is going to go. And how could it still
the problem is that it is not so much all the attacks on Romney and what it's going to do to his presidential campaign, because I don't think, I mean, he stands to sort of continue to be the front runner and get the nomination. The problem is the fallout for the industry. And all of this groundswell of bad news about private equity and how it's, leaving people unemployed in each state that they go to campaign and they find some private equity business that maybe Bain ran. It just keeps playing up on the national stage, which all that's going to do is help the Occupy movement, which is looking for anything new to latch onto.
Right.
And hope, and hopefully.
I think if you make $400 million in a year, or even $100 million a year, you're probably in the 0.001%.
Yeah, a lot of zeros in there. And what it's going to do is it should then reverberate onto the political stage. It's going to make it harder for Republicans to defend this carried interest tax change, which has come up in Congress multiple times.
It's just shocking that it hasn't actually been changed.
No, it is an egregiously unfair.
It's a truly unfair element of the tax code, and I've heard all the arguments from all the private equity guys about sweat equity and whatnot, but it's totally indefensible. And now that you have conservatives or Republican contenders basically calling out the industry, I just don't see how any of them could ever vote in any way except to get rid of it.
And in a way, it plays into a little bit of Carlyle. I mean, it looks like terrible timing for private equity for Carlyle to come up with it, but they had record distributions last year, and you kind of think, well, maybe that happened because they kind of saw the writing on the wall that this carried interest tax was going to change, and so let's distribute this money both to the top guys, and of course all the funds come along. They get big distributions too, and sort of be ahead of that change in the law.
I guess, just one last point. I mean, who is going to come out and defend? I mean, isn't it for someone like David Rubenstein or one of these guys at Carlyle to come out and say, look, yes, we paid ourselves a lot. Yes, the law is this. We pay ourselves according to the law. If you want to change it, whatever. But, we have $150 billion of funds that we invest on behalf of pension funds.
The 99%.
The 99% workers, state workers, that kind of thing, who are,
Teachers,
unionized and that kind of thing. I mean, it's sort of, clearly.
But the problem for the industry has been that they're the only ones defending themselves. It's not that, nobody's going to play violins for these guys who are making $400 million. But the point is that only them and their trade groups are sort of defending them. And it is interesting that the investors who who continually pump money into alternative assets like private equity, teachers, CalPERS, these big pension funds, are generally and almost always unwilling to step up and say, look,
we've got 8% returns while the markets, equity markets.
You don't have to necessarily defend private equity to say we're really thankful for the returns that we get from these guys, which would, then at least reposition the argument a little bit and give these guys a friend.
We will look at this as the story trundles forward, and we'll be back with more breaking views tomorrow.